think now it's recording, yes. Welcome to the Kuadrant community call, Tuesday, April the 16th. We have one item on the calendar. That's not the word, on the notes document. Be sure to add stuff if you want. But without further ado, let's give it to Guy. And he's aiming for 15 minutes conversation, so it's going to be problematic. Now, defaults and overrides, Guy, off you go.
Thanks, Thomas. No pressure, right? So this is about a problem or a limitation in Kuadrant that even though it says defaults and overrides, the problem is not really new. It's not a problem that comes with defaults and overrides. Rather, I would say it's a problem that becomes more apparent because of defaults and overrides. But it is a pre-existing problem, right? And it has to do with a particular use case of multiple resources defining an identical host name, right? The most classical form of it would be multiple HTTP routes that in the host name fields, they declare the exact same host name there, right? If it's the case of using wildcard host names, it's not a problem. It's only when you have the exact same host names there. Actually, even the wildcard host names, but as long as it's the same wildcard host names involved, right? The way it works, right? And by the way, I've just created an issue. I spent a few time writing some detailed description for the problem, even though you still see a few TBCs there to be confirmed, because I first thought that was affecting only the auth policy, but actually it also affects the rate limit policy. So I still need to fix the description there, right? But if you can use your screen right now, Thomas, while you stop playing with ChatGPT, on this very topology that we see in the diagram, I think you can use this as the background to explain the issue, right? In that topology, we have a gateway with two routes attached to the gateway, right? Where the gateway, for simplicity, defines one listener with the wildcard host name star.io. And both of the routes attached to the gateway is specified, as you can see, the exact same host name app.io. They only differ on the other HTTP matching routes, right? The ones that are not part of beyond the host name, right? If you will. In this case, they differ on the path, right? Which is a valid, set of gateway API resources. I think it's reasonable to assume that users will try to create that particular topology, right? Especially with the limitation on the maximum number of HTTP rules that you can put inside of an HTTP route, right? I think, if I'm not mistaken, currently that is set to 32 as the maximum number. So if you do have bigger HTTP routes, right, as in with multiple rules, and where all those rules share the same host name, you may feel tempted or even forced to split that into two routes and fall into this particular topology that you see there, right? And right now, if we have two auth policies and also two rate limit policies targeting one of those routes and the gateway, as in the one that targets the gateway is intended to set defaults for the routes that do not have a more specific policy attached to, right? So in this case, we have auth policy 1 and auth policy 2, and rate limit policy 1 being the more specific policies that apply to route A, and therefore expected to apply to all the traffic sent to app.io/foo. And the other auth policy and rate limit policy, auth policy 2 and rate limit policy 2, attached to the gateway, are the one expected to be enforced on the traffic that routes through route B, right? The one for app.io/bar. However, that is not exactly what happens in the data plane. And this is because of the fact that those two routes define the same host name, right? Because the host name is so important in Kuadrant to look up for the policy to be enforced, something that I believe to be true only for alt before, but now I've just confirmed it only works the same way in the WASM machine and therefore also for rate limiting. What's going to happen really is on the traffic that you send to app.io/foo, both policies terminated in -1 will be enforced, right? Alt policy 1, written policy 1. Whereas the traffic sent to route B, unlike the expectation, will not be protected with alt policy 2 and rate limited policy 2, right? And this is because app.io, even if you do not have a policy targeting route B directly, right? App.io is already linked to policies -1, right? That will make our alt service, Altarino, to first select alt policy 1 to enforce, but then give up on enforcing that policy because the condition on the path does not match, right? So it says, okay, I have the policy, but traffic's being requested is to /bar. This policy is for /foo, so it's not this one. And there's no fallback mechanism that tries something different than that policy. So it just deems the traffic to be authorized. And similarly, in the WASM machine, the WASM machine will decide that that policy does not apply, the policy linked to app.io does not apply, and it would just skip that, right, and not send the traffic to a limited door. So the only advantage here for rate limiting is that you can save the request to the external service, right, compared to alt. But in both cases, what I imagine users would expect, which is the default policy to be enforced, will not happen, right? So this is a problem we know. This is a problem we have for a while. I believe it's going to become more noticeable with defaults and overrides, because one who defined a policy for the gateway now might be explicit about requesting a default to be enforced, right? So it's in the spec of the policy. So you say that you want that to be enforced as a default, but in the end, it won't, right? So we've been exploring with multiple ways to fix that, right? To solve that problem. I tried to summarize those there in the issue. I'll let you check on that later offline. No need to expand on that. More importantly, I think it's we need to share the plan we have for the next for the following weeks regarding this particular problem, right? And the plan starts with number one, documenting the limitation. I don't think this is properly documented anywhere in the Kuadrant documentation. So step number one is we're going to make sure that we document this. Step number two, we're going to pick one of those possible approaches, possibly even a completely different one if something we're lucky of something being suggested. And likely the best candidate to start with is number one there, due to the simplicity to implement. Even though I personally have my reservations against it, and I think we can discuss on that some other time, but I do agree that that would be the easiest way into supporting, if not all, a portion of the use cases that we see coming up from this issue of identical host names into multiple routes. The next best one, and possibly even the best overall in the long term, would be bringing also WASP into the WASP machine and working on the WASP machine to make sure that it covers, for the proper lookup of the policy, both for rate limiting and for all beyond the host name, right? There's some additional information that I recommend checking and reading the entire issue to know about. Excuse me.
Indeed,
such as the fact that.
Craig,
Yeah,
I'll question on your first point. Okay.
I can see that. I'll hand it over in a second, Craig. So I recommend checking the full description of the issue, because while we are only allowing targeting HP routes and gateways, we're still in safe territory, right? Where apologies, where we can work with host names and other HTTP attributes for indexing and triggering the corresponding policies in a deterministic way. But if we one day move to other or start supporting other kinds of resources to be targeted by our policies, such as services, namespaces, then solutions based on using only the HTTP attributes to index and to decide which policy to enforce may no longer suffice. So I encourage you to check on the description in the issue to understand what I mean by that. Yeah, Craig.
Yeah, so thanks, Lee. I agree with your summary. Just one thought on the documentation. I guess an option for mitigating here is to say, if you do have two HTTP routes with the same host in it, you can make sure that the policies are applied by defining a policy on each of those HTTP routes, right? Or does that still fail?
I'm afraid no, it won't work. I'm afraid, because the host name continues to be, you know, the lead on looking up and selecting one of the policies. So since those two policies would share the same host name, right? One of them would be accepted, right, and the other one would be rejected.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm afraid that at the moment we're limited to supporting only use cases where the rules do not share any host name at all. So if you have more than one root, they should be independent host names. You can work with sets and subsets, right? With wildcard host names.
Yeah. Okay, I understand.
But that's it.
Okay, so I guess we just call out that we don't support the same host in multiple HTTP routes.
Yeah, and I would like to reinforce that this is a very short-term approach, obviously, right? So we want to make sure that it's documented so we can move on with the next release of Kuadrant. We're not postponing indefinitely, you know, a proper solution for this. And on the contrary, right? The reason why we're bringing this up is because we want to follow up on this and to decide as soon as possible on the proper way to approach the problem.
Yeah. Yep. That makes sense. Like you said, like I wonder like how many, it'd be interesting to see how many people hit this issue or how many people need to use multiple HTTP routes. But like you said, there is like a limitation on the HTTP route where they'll only allow you to define a certain number of rules, right? And the other situation where I could see it was if you had two different backends serving like different paths of the API potentially. So maybe you have like a HTTP route in namespace 1 and a HTTP route in namespace 2, and two teams are responsible for, you know, /checkout and / I don't know, catalog or whatever, right? That could also potentially trigger that.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. In fact, I do remember of some real life use cases where the entire service ecosystem was based on routing using the path rather than like subdomains. So yeah, that can easily happen. Thomas?
Yeah. Question: how, like, if I'm thinking about a complete separate subject, like if I'm thinking about working well with other gateway API implementations, I remember it once was said, then we need to port the whole thing to WASM anyway, because that makes it much easier. Maybe it's a misremembering. Is that true? And if so, maybe that might be another reason to just go for that WASM direction.
Yeah, we are aware of some challenges of supporting Envoy Gateway and with WASM. I think we are progressing on that regard, so maybe we won't be an issue as soon. But to be fair, for all the thing that we do today without WASM, right? If we do have the limitation in Istio, and I'm explaining that in this issue, last time I checked, I suppose this would also be a problem for supporting Envoy Gateway, right? Let's say we integrate external authorization by leveraging Envoy Gateway security policy API. As far as I can remember, that API does not include anything for to specify additional context to be passed in the request to external authorization service. So in that sense, it looks very similar to the EAST authorization policy.
My point was that it would actually be a pro if we would switch to WASM for integrating with other.
Yeah. I'm bringing both sides here. So yeah, so if we go with WASM, we do have more control. We have full control over the payload we send to those services. That's good, right? I'm only aware of an issue of supporting WASM in Envoy Gateway, but that's not enough to not follow that rule. On the contrary, right? I mean, the other option is even harder. If we keep on using EAST authorization policy, and as last time I checked, Envoy security policy for alt, at least we know that it won't work, to solve this particular problem we have. Yeah, I agree with Alex's comment. Another point in favor of WASM is that, in theory, it should be more portable, right? Even though all the implementations we have, in sight are at the moment based on Envoy, and therefore we could assume those two APIs of Envoy available, right? External alt and rate limiting. But there's no doubt that WASM would be even better in terms of portability.
So option one is modify Authorino, its index. Have you thought how far you want to modify it? Like, I know we were discussing it in chat a little bit, but is it just paths, or are you thinking like trying to basically rebuild the HTTP rule as an index or something like that?
Well, to decide on that, I think we need to keep in mind that if we had control over the payload we send to the external authorization service, which we don't today, right, because of EAST authorization policy API, we wouldn't need to change anything in Authorino at all, because Authorino already provides, with the features we need to fix this problem, right? It's already part of the Authorino feature set. The host name is the default for I mean, it's called host name, but in the end, it's not a host name, right? You can index Authorino alt configs by any key you want, right? As long as with control over the request sent to external to Authorino, you specify that key, right? Without specifying that key, it defaults to the host name of the original HTTP request being handled, right? So Authorino already has a way to solve this problem if we control the request to external auth. So the question is how hard it is to control that request, right? So this is the comparison we're making here. So how far we want to go with Authorino? Well, as long as it's not as far as what we would need to do in order to take control over the requests, we can keep going in Authorino. My proposal would be to not go farther than implementing some kind of fallback mechanism where if you do not, the first alt config you pick does not apply due to the top level conditions, then you fall back to the more generic one, and you keep doing that until you reach the root of the tree, right, of host names. But that only solves for a small portion of the use cases. It does solve for the use case I've just described, right? But it doesn't solve for the use case of having another policy for the second root, right? If one creates like alt policy 3, attach it to root B, it would not work. Authorino would still reject the second alt policy, right? Because the host name is taken, and then there's the problem. So there is no way in the current index of alt configs in Authorino to index multiple alt configs with the same host name. And that, I think, would be too much to change, especially because, as I said before, there is already another way, right? So I don't know. I mean, we can solve part of the use cases, part of the problem, but not all of it. Definitely not, all we can imagine in the long term. with more kinds of network resources being possibly targeted by Kuadrant policies, right, in the future. So I don't know.
Yeah,
If we evaluate option number 2, let's say, and we judge that that could be done in a reasonable amount of time, I would skip straight to number 2.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I can see some potential confusion there as well, right? Like how do I know as a user that when I create that second auth policy on the HTTP route that's not being applied, and that actually the one on the gateway is now being applied, really, like, because of our implementation there. So like that's going to be pretty hidden and confusing.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I do think if we can document, if we're happy, like I would say documenting that we just don't support that right now. Like, we're being clear about it and we're being upfront about it. It's not like, we're trying to hide it away in any way. Then that's just the current state of things. And I think if we can link to like this issue from that and say there is a solution coming, we're working on it. That feels reasonable to me as a place to land with this release. But I don't know that I would necessarily rush into this fallback, because I'm not sure how predictable it is from a end user point of view, and whether it's going to sort of make people a little bit more, if it's going to be a bit more confusing than helpful sometimes, now it's also going to be confusing if you hit this issue without realizing that it's not supported, right? But at least if you go to the docs or to the GitHub issues, you should find this and see, like, oh, I see, it's not actually supported. Yeah, that's kind of where my head is at.
Sounds like another vote for a 2-step solution only then, instead of 3.
Yeah.
Okay. There's something. There's a comment by Alex in the chat about the effort to bring auth into the WAS machine, regardless of this particular problem, right? Meaning only the current set of use cases we do support today, and what kind of effort we're talking about to bring that to WAS, right? And I think that's an interesting question, right? I don't want to underestimate the effort, but we do have a good framework, right? Because of what's already implemented for rate limiting. For sure, there are some considerations, such as the set of well-known selectors. I don't think they are. There's definitely overlap, obviously overlap between auth and rate limiting, but they are not identical sets, right? So I'm not sure if we would have to give up on some of those well-known attributes. Sorry, I said selectors before. Well-known attributes once we bring auth into the WAS machine, but maybe that's a fair price to pay. Yeah. Something I not mentioned before, but I think it's worth highlighting, is that, because I'm bringing this in the context of diffusion override, right? Because as I said, I believe this will be more apparent with diffusion override. And maybe I didn't even mention in the description, I should add that this is not a problem for overrides though. Okay, the way we are working on the implementation for overrides, we're good. So no problem. This is only a problem for defaults. It's still a problem for multiple policies targeting routes, right? Different routes. But in that particular case, I showed one policy at the root, another one at the gateway. If the one on the gateway is an override, there's no problem at all. Because in that case, just don't create the more specific policy. We only create the override one.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely a fan for investigating the WASM and kind of putting some kind of guesstimate around that, because yeah, like if the Auth fixed the 2 policies, one targeting both HTTP routes, like I'd be like, okay, we're kind of most of the way there. That's because we're not getting that part. I feel like it's not worth the effort, So yeah, I guess that's where I land. But if anyone else got opinions, shout.
Yep, I'm with you, Craig. I see no hands raised, so people a second to share their thoughts if they want to. You can also, go and do that in the issue. By the way, the issue is to document, that, right? So that is what the issue is about. I only left that description so we have some material, to work with for the actual pull request for the documentation.
I mean, the other thing to consider here is we're killing two birds with one stone by doing it this way, by doing the WASM thing. We wanted to do that anyway and drop reliance on the Istio off policy API. So we're getting that plus fixing this problem. So like it seems like a win-win, right? So
yeah,
and not the release we're talking about is a developer preview release. It's a upstream release, so it's not considered production ready at this point. So I think it's reasonable. Yeah. Sorry, I'm reiterating my own thoughts, but saying them out loud.
No, that's fine, and I completely agree. I mean, provided we are fine, with increasing the I call dependence, but it's not really dependence. I mean, there's the commitment with this approach on the WASM module for integration. Then it's a no-brainer. All right. So I guess it's back to you then, Thomas. If you're still here, right? I know you had a hard stop.
I am, but I'm driving a car now, so you take over.
Okay, no problem. Okay. Well, that was the only item we had in the agenda anyway, unless somebody added anything last minute, which I did not see. So, yeah, if we have nothing else, yeah, that's it. Okay. So thank you so much. Everybody. I'll give you 30 minutes back and cheers.
Ciao.
Ciao.